Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. Thank you so much for being here. So, today I am joined by the amazing Robert Prime. Now, Robert Prime is an ex health anxiety sufferer like myself, and he spent many years trapped in the darkest depths of health anxiety, and he managed to find his way through. And he's now written a book, which we're going to be talking about, and I'd love to be able to share his knowledge with you. So, welcome, Rob. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Thank
it's
you.
lovely to see you. So,
Thanks.
Rob, let's start from the beginning because this has been a long journey for you. Could you take us back to, I guess, the early days? Like, how did you even recognize that you had health anxiety?
Yeah, so basically I'm 50 now, and I think I actually, when I was thinking about this, I can't remember the first time that I recognized I had it because it crept up over time basically. So I was thinking about this and it was like, there was not a specific moment where I thought I have health anxiety now. And then before I knew it, I was like in the midst of, the deepest thoughts about things, basically. So I will say that it's now 15, well, about 15 years since I've had any health anxiety. So, and before that, I would say between 18 and 35, basically I had it. And yeah, and as I said, there was no specific time, but before I knew it, I was pretty much spending like most of my waking life, thinking about or checking or reassuring things. And that was quite telling to me that there wasn't a definitive moment where I thought, oh, I have health anxiety actually, because it just showed how it crept up and became my norm, basically.
I think it absolutely does. And I think, unless you have for me, I had a health diagnosis. So I can almost pinpoint
Right.
a moment where I went into that room and I
Mm,
had the diagnosis. So I pinpointed to
mm,
that. But actually, if I look deeper, I probably did have signs of health anxiety prior to that. That probably was the catalyst for me. But you're 100% right. It creeps up. And before you know it, you're smothered by this thing.
yeah.
So how was it affecting you? You had it for such a long time. How was it what was it at its worst?
Yeah, at its worst, I would say it would have to have been, I look back and I don't know where I got the time from, but it would have to have been like 6, 7 hours a day of, just literally searching through Google and things, which I know sounds crazy, but I had my own business and I was able to make the time somehow to do that. And I would say it's in your, for me personally, it was in my every waking moment that I wasn't thinking about something like, knock on the door might just, but every other time I was thinking about it basically. So I think the worst time would have been, could spend a whole day on Google basically, going into like the depths of stats and data and things like that. Yeah, so that would have been at the worst. And it's like living in a constant high alert state, I would guess. And I only realized that no, I'm not in a constant high alert state, of how that was. So that would definitely have been the worst. And yeah, very all consuming basically. And I remember taking some comfort from sometimes going outside and being amongst other people because I had a business, computer run business. Sometimes I'd go amongst people and I would feel a little better, funny enough. But yeah, it definitely got very much caught in a cycle that was like that. And it was, yeah, very consuming. So yeah, it's hard to do anything else when you're in that mode.
That's it. You're looking for an answer, which is very
Yeah.
difficult to find because you're looking for certainty, which doesn't
Mhm.
exist. But we almost
Yeah.
become like a detective, don't we? Where it's like another job in a way.
Yeah.
It's if you're running a successful business, but equally you have this sideline,
Mhm.
which is I need to prove I'm not going to die sideline,
Yeah.
and that's exactly so time consuming, so exhausting for you for one.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did it affect, your loved ones and those around you? How were they affected by all of this?
Yeah, I think I was very good at keeping it a secret, actually. And I know that's crazy because it's such a big part of your life. And that my wife I met when I was 29, so she only saw the last few years of it. But basically, I kept most of it a secret in the fact that she would know that I was obsessively worried about health and things like that. But I wouldn't tell her if I was going to the bathroom specifically, if we were out and I was going to the bathroom, like for example, multiple times, I would just say I had a bad stomach rather than I was maybe like checking for a twitch or something stupid like so not stupid is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Something that's irrational, basically. I wouldn't share all of that. So I think even now, I don't believe my wife actually really realizes, you know, quite where I was at with it, to be honest with you. So but it would have, it's a very you I've spoke about this before. It's a very hard. It's a very hard thing to understand unless you've experienced it or are within it, I would say, because it looks so rational, doesn't it? It looks so like, well, come on, just, just sort it out, whatever. It's so yeah, I don't actually think that, yeah, it's very hard, it's very, very hard for anybody else to understand, is what I would say.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk then about, your wife not knowing the full extent of it.
Mm,
And I remember having a conversation with my mum a couple of years ago, and I started doing this, and I was getting clients and things were coming along, and she said, I didn't even know you had it.
mm,
You hid it so well. I didn't even
yeah.
know. She said, I remember coming round once and you talked about you'd phoned an ambulance, and I thought, well, there's nothing wrong with you. What's the matter? Um,
Hmm.
but she said, apart from that one incident, she said, I had no idea. And obviously, my husband did because he was living with me. That was different.
Hmm.
But we are very good at, keeping it close to we don't want to express it really. We feel it is, I guess, a weakness.
Yeah.
And in a way that's sad, really. If we don't feel like we're understood or people don't get it, it
Hmm.
can be really difficult.
So absolutely, and there is an element of like for me was stigma attached to it, and in terms of embarrassed by it, in that respect, and especially doing anything like that for like a such a sustained period, it's so obsessively is kind of there is so it is something that so I would share information about it, but not all of it, basically.
Yeah,
You know.
like almost like a guilty secret, like this sort of side of
Yeah,
them that we,
yeah,
we're
yeah.
striving to prove that we're actually okay. So Googling, so we have obviously the safety behaviors that we know of are checking, seeking reassurance,
Mm,
Googling, those things. Avoidance is another one.
mm.
Did you find one of those in particular you were constantly doing? Because your book is called Google Panic Repeat, which we'll come on to talk about. But was there one particular safety behavior that really kept you stuck?
Yeah, it was basically I got very deep into probabilities and stats, basically for me personally. And obviously, I was doing the checking, like of whether it be a lump, a twitch, or thing like that. I discovered that we actually got a lot more lumps and bumps and twitches and things once you start prodding yourself enough. I think most of us have probably got things. You'll find something. Basically, is the bottom line. And yeah, and I think for me it was the Google, the checking, and that could start off as like generic symptom, blah blah blah. It could be you've had a flu or something, and then you go down the rungs of that basically until you end up at like age-adjusted statistics for cancer of the inner colon. Do you know what I mean? It's something so deep, and you've gone down such a rabbit hole that you end up so far down it as to like looking at clinical studies about about things of how to like repair illnesses that you don't even know that you've got. You know what I mean? Survival statistics and all this sort of stuff. So for me, it became obsessively about that. About the data, and that's the big key takeaway is that you cannot prove something that like a something you can't prove you're not. I can't prove right sitting here right now that I'm not ill. Basically, that's the bottom line. So
Yeah.
it's a wasted journey, frankly. But that was the rabbit hole I went down personally.
So
You
the
know.
statistics and
Yeah.
getting the clinical trials. So in your book, which I'll just mention again, so it's called Google Panic Repeat. You talk about how you were very much into statistics, and when we say, oh, that the likelihood of getting that disease is extremely rare. Like
Yeah.
but for your mind, you were thinking, well, maybe I am the rarity here. Maybe I am the exception to the rule. And so I guess
Absolutely.
that's why you were then trying to prove when you talk about, I don't know, was it ALS or MND, one of those that you thought,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was where it ended up. It started off with like lots of different types of cancer, and then it went to other things, and then it went to that, which for me was like something that like didn't just affect me massively, would have affected like my family as well and so forth. So it was something. It was felt like like, and that was when I got into groups online where there was lots of people that had similar sort of, I guess, like fixations is the right word. But yeah, but yeah, focusing on that. And I saw someone about that, and he just it was a doctor, and he in Harley Street actually, and I and I just spent a lot of money on it. I didn't wasn't money that I had at the time either. But basically he said you've probably got a 1 in 20 chance. He just chucked it out there like that. And that's a memory that I always have that very sharp memory because like he just chucked it out there in such a way, just like
often,
it's probably
yeah.
1 in 20. And I looked devastated. I went like white as a sheet. And he was like, well, what? I thought that was good news. Like that's what he said to me. He said, I thought that was good news. But to me, 1 in 20 was almost like, I don't know. And I went out of his office later and I held onto the banister on the way out. And I remember getting the tube home. It's all so vivid, all of that stuff. And that's, I guess, why doctors don't tend to give you probabilities like that, as a rule, because for that reason, because it means something different to everybody, right?
Yeah.
So
To us,
yeah,
I mean, 1 in 20,000, you might have felt slightly better, but 1 in 20 for a health anxiety sufferer, we're starting to think, okay, the probability is maybe that's, my bad luck that I am that 1 in 20.
exactly. Given the fact that probably in the unrealistic state of mind I was in, like 1 in 20,000 doesn't sound great. 1 in 20 was like a certainty.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was always that was always a memory that I always remember, a lot. And the funny thing was, and I'll say here is that there was a part of me that deep down knew, well, not know that there was a part of me that thought I wasn't ill. And this is something that's like really important to mention. Like a part of me, but I couldn't find it. Do you know what I mean? It was like, and I always used to do this analogy in my head. I was thinking like, if someone gave you like a toss a coin and you've got this illness or you haven't, would I do it? Well, no, I wouldn't. Yeah, I was convinced I had it. So do you see what I mean? It was like there was things working against each other. If you gave me a bag of 10 things in it, and if you pick the wrong number and you've got this terrible illness, would I take the risk? No, I wouldn't. But I'm convinced that I have it at the same time. So how does that work? And that was what really interested me in how the mind works, how you can be certain of something and yet deep down you're not, so to speak, as
It's
well.
so contradictory, isn't it?
Mm,
And actually, I was talking to somebody the other day who was saying, I know I need to lose a bit of weight. I need
mhm,
to, I know I'm not the healthiest, but actually, that's not in any way concerning for me right now. My concern is my health anxiety. It's not the
yeah,
weight at all. The doctors can say, you need to lose a few pounds because it's affecting your health, but that is not a concern. My concern is something that is I'm really fixated on, whatever that was for that
mhm,
particular person. So yeah,
yeah.
we very much hone in on the thing that is close to home, and we know that. So I guess when you're looking at those symptoms that that popped up for you, were they close to home? Were they obviously things that struck a chord with you based on what you knew and things that happened to people that you perhaps had been around?
Honestly, like there wasn't really a pattern of that for me personally. It was more I made things fit. Like, and it could be honestly something seeing something on the news, or it could be seeing something in a newspaper, or it could be something that and and again that was where I got most interested into, I think if it, before health anxiety, I was very anxious anyway. So I think my anxiety was latching on, looking for something to latch onto, and health made a lot of sense because, frankly, there's a kind of part of me that think, well, health, yeah, it's a worrying thing, and so therefore I was making things fit basically. It wasn't necessarily that I saw anybody that had a specific illness, but I might see something on the TV, on a news program, in a paper, whatever, and I could then think, okay, well, that must explain the feeling that I have, if you know what I mean. And then I'd latch onto that, and then you can make most things right if you want to, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, health anxiety symptoms can be so vague and
Yeah.
varied, all sorts of weird and wonderful things, and they can absolutely mimic signs of something that's a lot more harmful. So that's where we get to, isn't it? Where we have that symptom that feels very real because,
Hmm.
if you talk about the twitching that you had, that's a very real thing that was happening, but your
Yeah,
mind has gone to worst case scenario. It's gone to, oh my
absolutely.
goodness, this is something horrific, as
Yeah.
opposed to the reality is you have a heightened nervous system. Your nervous system is shouting out saying you need reassurance, you need to be
Hmm.
calmed down.
Yeah.
um
And I still have that now, by the way. Like, my feet, like when, if I look at my foot, my toes sometimes move and I still have exactly the same twitch that I did like this is, 30 years ago. I still have it now. And I probably had it like 10 years before that, but I just had never noticed it. So yeah, it's that's the silly thing. It's like all these things that, I found out that I have my ECG measurement is abnormal. And I didn't, these are things you wouldn't even know until you've gone and checked them, basically, is what I'm saying. So these
yeah.
are things, so yeah.
You talk about how, if you look hard enough, you will find something that starts to hurt a bit. And when you talk about the twitching, it
Hmm.
probably had always been there, but you hadn't noticed it. And like you said in your book, if you prod hard enough, you will find a problem. Or if you hold your finger up for long enough, it's going to
Hmm.
start to hurt or ache, and therefore you're
Yeah,
going to cause that issue.
yes, absolutely.
So some of these things, because we've been busy in our lives and we haven't paid attention to it, it's not saying that it hasn't been there, but the minute
Mhm.
we start to associate a danger to that particular thing, that's when our mind can take us to goodness knows where.
Absolutely, especially if you things like, even, certain types of illness that rely on maybe changing like your bowel habit, toilet habits, whatever. If you're anxious, you're probably going to get that anyway, those sort of things. Anxiety produces a lot of symptoms on its own. You might not be eating that well, you may lose weight, and these things are then triggers for the other thing, which are like so it's like, I'm not suggesting that's obviously always the case, but you know what I'm saying? It's like anxiety brings on a lot of actual symptoms that people manifest, and people that I've spoken to since about health anxiety, they say, well, my symptoms are very real. I feel them. I do have this feeling, and they are actual feelings. It's not all imaginary. People feel, these things, and that's worth mentioning.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest parts of this is, we are not making this up. These symptoms that we have are 100% real. We feel them,
Yeah.
they are with us sometimes 24/7 and
Mm.
they're there all the time. But it's not to say that we're making them up. They are somatic symptoms based on our body's heightened response. But that's the
Mm.
hardest thing because what we then do is try and seek evidence to find out the answer for that particular physical problem. But we are always looking for a physical answer. So,
Yes.
to say I have health anxiety, that's just not got enough evidence within it. We need something more concrete, and we're looking for a physical solution to a physical problem. And
Yeah.
it's the whole I mean, I call it the hamster wheel.
Mhm.
I'm sure you had other words for it.
Yeah, probably a lot of words for it, but yeah, you're absolutely right. You're trying to solve, yeah, you're trying to solve a problem like in a way that, yeah, you're not able to basically. It's for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of, I guess, what would I guess we touched on people who perhaps haven't had health anxiety, and when
Mhm.
you talk about your relationships and trying to make people understand. But what would you say to somebody who hasn't had health anxiety? Because I think it's very difficult for to explain that to other
Mhm.
people.
I would say if you haven't had it, like, try not to be judgmental about it. Definitely try not to say. I think it's I think understand that this is someone's reality, basically, and they do believe this, and they are suffering. Basically, these people, that would have it, and you don't have to necessarily even understand it, but I think be empathetic to that. Basically, really, I would say, and definitely don't say things like, "Well, just go and you know, don't don't trivialize it." I would suggest, like, as in, like, just go get checked, or just snap out of it, or these sort of things. Because if it was that straightforward, we're not stupid people. We would just do that. Like, so that's what I would say. Just try and be empathetic. Even, you don't necessarily even have to understand it, but just be appreciate that someone's living a different reality to you, really.
Yeah, I think that can add fuel to the fire, can't it? When someone says, "Oh, what are you worrying about?" And that's something my husband used to always say to me. What are you
Mm.
worrying about? Isn't it? What are you worrying
Mm.
about? There's nothing to worry about. You're fine.
Yeah.
That's and then I'd be like, "Well, clearly I'm not because I have this and then I'd reel off a
Mm.
whole list of everything that I had, and then they don't really have an answer to that because
No.
you have a comeback for everything. Then
Yeah.
it's difficult in that situation. But I think unless you've walked this path, it's very difficult to understand. So you've
It
now
is.
gone on to write a book. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know you have something called a flip method, which I
Mhm.
really enjoyed reading about. It has a lot of similarities to the method that I teach, and I know that you go on to explain it's not your method, it's the way you've
Mm.
branded it up, and
Yeah.
you talk about that in the back of the book. And that's exactly the same as the how I've got to the way that I teach. But what inspired you to write the book, Rob?
What inspired me to write the book was a sense of duty, actually. Like, genuinely, it was a sense. It felt like an obligation to write it. Like, and I've been in marketing, all my life, and I had the ability to write it, and it felt like I should write it. And I put it off for many years. I don't know why, really, but I just did. And so honestly, like, it was because I felt I should write it. That's why I wrote it. And people say all the cliches about if it helps one person, all this sort of stuff. But when you actually have helped one person, you realize actually that is actually it's a cliche for a reason. And so a couple of people that read it said, "Listen, thank you for writing. It's really changed my life." And it's like, so I wrote it for that, genuinely for that reason. I don't expect to get rich from it. But I wrote it because that was the book that I didn't have when I wanted it. Because personally, I look at things in a certain way, that I want something simple and actionable. That's for me what I wanted, like a takeaway thing that I could start with. I don't suggest it's the key to everything, and it's nothing groundbreaking and new in it either. Like, it's basically repackaged cognitive behavioral therapy. But I did read a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy books, which were huge, and I struggled to get to the core of what I'm supposed to do when I put the book down. Basically, that was for me doing it. And I read books about the fear of dying and stuff like that. They didn't do anything for me. So it was really the book that I personally wanted that worked for me, and that was why that was why I wrote it. So
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, it's like I said to you before we press record, it is a very simply laid
mm,
out book, easy to understand. You're very humorous in your writing, which makes it a real enjoyable read as well. So it's great for the reader as well.
oh, thank
So
you.
I guess you've gone on to help people, and you've had rave reviews, and but the turning point for you between being in that depths of health anxiety, and now being 15 years out the other side. Prior to writing the book, where was the point where you thought, actually, I'm making traction now, things are starting to change? What had flipped in your mind?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's basically, and I thought about this a lot. It's really realizing the big things. One was that I didn't fear dying. I didn't actually fear health. I didn't, deep down, even though I did, that wasn't what I was trying to. I was trying to cure that. I read books about making peace with death. Read books about all these different things, and that was the wrong battle. Basically, that was the first thing that helped me a lot. Realizing that that was they didn't. The battle was something else, and to me, I put it down to in the end, I realized it was a pattern that I'd got into basically. So that was what really made the difference to me. And the other third thing I would say would be not trying to look for a magic bullet, look for that magic cure. It didn't exist, basically. And if I've spent like years building into this, it would be irrational for me to think that I can just get out of it by reading a certain sentence in a book or a day. So that was the other thing I had to make, but I had to focus on progress as well, and look at progress. So I think those were the key breakthrough moments for me. And obviously realizing that yes, I am fueling it myself by looking at it, realizing that I must have been getting some form of reward for looking at the stuff as well, in terms of that was an important thing to realize, because people don't spend 8 hours of their day doing something that they completely hate as well, because it's like, so I must have been getting some reward somewhere for it. So all these things combined really, but I think the biggest thing would be progress. That was what I started to focus on, progress, and realizing that and trying to get in touch with the part of me that was actually um the part of me that was that realized that I was okay. And lastly, realizing that all these thoughts that I was having were there to actually protect me, and kind of like making friends with this anxiety was a really big turning point for me, frankly. Rather than treating it as this terrible thing to cut out, I've actually, honestly, I've now got it sounds like quite crazy to say, but I can always, like, I've got a conversation with, like, my anxious self, and I still, the goal was not to get rid of anxiety altogether. That was never the goal, because I think anxiety can be useful, but it was to try and temper it. So I know there's a lot in that, but basically progress, that was the key thing. Even if it's one less thing per day, one less check per day, etc. And then
Baby steps.
yeah, and self
Yeah.
reassurance afterwards that you're okay. This was the other thing. That was very important to me. That conversation with my subconscious, saying like, okay, divert, but not just divert away and then put your fingers in your ears, but actually to say, have I taken all the action I can take? This was a very important part of the book for me. First of all, not getting people to put their fingers in their ears and say, don't do anything, because frankly, people can miss things if they do that. Right? That is not smart. I'll go and get a test if I need one, but I'll just go and do it immediately. Now that's the difference. I came back, from the doctor this morning. It's like, I have no, but so take the action you need. So really the stages were, notice the thought, have I taken the action that I need to take? And by need, that's different for everybody. But have I got the test? Have I been to the, whatever. And then if I have, now I can move on to something else. And once I moved on to something else, immediately just thank myself and say, look, everything's fine. I've got everything under control and I've done all I can. And that to me was meaning that that was important, and just repeating that and trusting that that would actually reduce the frequency. And when I could see that to start with, I could say, okay, yeah, if I reduce the frequency by that much, imagine what I'll be like in another week, and so on. So progress as
Yeah.
well, really. So yeah, a lot again. Sorry, it's a lot in there, but that's kind of
Yeah, no, I love that, because what you've done is you almost had a tick box,
mm,
tick all the boxes of things that I can do to help myself feel safe in this moment.
yes,
And if I've done all of those,
absolutely,
then I know I've done as much as I can in that time, and then
yeah,
I'll distract myself, I'll move on, I'll flip the
100%.
narrative.
100%. And that, like a lot of people with health anxiety would delay a test for months. I would delay a test for like literally months, like 6 months, 8 months. And the whole point of this is that, you know, and again, that I don't want to, it's not medical advice. People realize with their doctors and those things if they need tests or not. If you need the thing, you know, just get it done and then move on. Basically, that's the key. Not just move on, but you have to like, do what you need to and then move on. And then,
Yeah.
and then you've done everything you can. And then logically speaking, then you can say, well, worry has no help anymore. There's nothing I can find from it because I've literally taken every action I possibly could. And, anything else is a complete waste of time. And yeah, it's easier said than done, but with practice, that
With
worked for me.
practice, yeah, and
Yeah.
you talk about that over a 30-day period, and I guess over that time you're seeing little improvement, gradual, and that's exactly the way I teach. I have an
Mhm.
8-week program, so I always say to people, don't expect this to change overnight. I don't have a magic potion for this,
Mhm.
but if you start to do the things that I'm teaching and implementing, and you're
Mhm.
consistent with it, I think that's really key. Things will start to change for you. But recognize, and for you had health anxiety for all those years. It was never going to be a quick fix. But
Mhm.
when you start the ball moving and you start to gain that momentum, absolutely, as you just said, praise yourself, look at, recognize how well you're doing, give yourself that pat on the back, and then keep going with it. Eventually things will start to snowball.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, without a doubt, and it's really like, it's when I see it as the anxiety sort of coming and looking for a home, and if you're basically not giving it a home, you're assessing it, and you're not really letting it into your deeper consciousness, and the equivalent would be, feeding your dog cat at the dinner table, and if you do it once or twice, every time the dog or cat is going to come and put its paws up on the table basically, and it's going to be like, I want food, and you do it, and and it will just do it forever. And the only way you're ever going to do that is by detraining it to not do that basically. And that's kind of how I looked at it in simplistic terms, was really just taking away the trigger, so there was nothing there for it. You know what I mean? It's like everything's been done, everything's good, I've moved on. There's nothing here for you. Do you know what I mean? That's
I
yeah.
love that. And I think we do need to simplify it because, as we know, if you're just here in terms of seeking help for health anxiety and you don't know where to start, this
Mhm.
whole place can be a complete minefield. So, having simplistic resources and tools that you can actively implement, that's going to really help you because it is a confusing world.
It is.
It's a very tough place to be stuck. But I think, when we flip this back and look at, control, I think is really important here. And,
Mhm.
just having a method,
Mhm.
regardless of whether actually you believe in it or not to start with. Once you start to implement it and continue with that consistency and see the results, then you can start to okay, this is working for me. I'm going to keep going with this, and I think that's really key as well. That gives you some element of control there.
Yeah, because if someone's was watching and they said like you have to cure your health anxiety today, they'd be like, that's not possible. But if I said to you, spend 1 minute less today doing something else, thinking about it, everybody can do that. Everybody can do that. And then maybe tomorrow, that might be a bit easier to do 2 minutes. So and then you can see progress, then you can see an end to it, and then you can say, actually, I'm getting the better of this, sort of so to speak. But yeah, but as I say, I just definitely there was no looking for a magic bullet. There was no magic stat I was ever going to find, to be frank. So
That fear shouts really loud, doesn't it? And I think,
yeah.
when we are avoiding medical situations, and like you said, you avoided them for months and months, what we're
Yeah.
actually telling ourselves is there is a problem with going to that
Mhm.
that thing. So therefore that thing is a feared response.
Yeah.
But actually what we know is when we do it, how many times have we all gone through stuff and gone, God, what was I worrying about? Actually, it was
Mhm.
okay. And then when the results come back and say, I am absolutely fine, you just think, well, what a waste. I spent all that time worrying
Yeah.
about it when, here I am.
Absolutely. And you do that, like hopefully people watching don't have to do that as many times as I did, because I honestly like I started counting up to like, 20, and stopped counting. Do you know what I mean? And when I look back, it's kind of like, yeah, I do think, wow, it's like at what point would I realize that this is, you know, more of a but the problem is every one of those didn't mean that you weren't right that one time. That's the that part of me would say, well, that doesn't mean that you weren't right this time. So yeah.
You've always got that niggly, the niggling, I call it a gremlin, or maybe it's
Yeah.
the younger version of yourself, whatever it is, but that niggling voice that says, listen to me, there's a problem, you need to pay attention. And it is about calming that and, also signaling that you are okay. You actually are all right in this moment, despite the fact you might not feel it.
Yeah,
You are safe. The more you can do that, I think you agree, that's how we move forwards.
sure, absolutely.
So you've gone on to, and I was quite interested to read this because you've actually run a marathon. So your body is super amazing, and I love that because if you can see my little sign
Oh,
behind
right.
me, I did the London Marathon too. So yeah,
Ah, nice.
the 26.2 miles. So I was really pleased to read that, Rob, because I know what an
Mm,
amazing feat for your body that is.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so effectively the same guy that told me the 1 in 20, he was 150 pound an hour doctor in Harley Street and at the time, and he told me the 1 in 20 thing. And he did give me one good bit of advice, which was basically he could tell that I was a health anxious person. He said effectively, basically like go and exercise and learn to trust your body is basically his words, something like that. And actually, to be quite frank, that was probably worth the money and more because so exercise was a big part of it for me. Um, and just when you're exercising, it's kind of goes against all of those thoughts really. And when you're improving exercising and things like that. So I was never going to be a great runner or anything like that, but I did end up doing the London Marathon, and you know, and basically just building up the same way from just nothing to doing that. It's a really important part of recovery, really. That's what I'm saying. There's so many things that feed into this, I think. It's not just one, even, one method. There's like that combined with exercising and learning to trust your body, realizing that a healthy body makes it far less likely that these things are true as well. And also it's great mentally for you. So yeah, so I did that, and it was definitely not going to say I was any great talent at it, but it was but it's the journey of doing it, as you know, like the journey of the training you do for it as well. It's like,
Yeah, yeah, and I think you said you did it on one of the hottest days. I do remember my
yeah.
brother-in-law, his brother had done it on that day, and I remember he really struggled in that marathon.
I, yeah.
Bless
I've
you.
done
That's
I've done all the training in weather like this, which is like at the moment it's raining outside and cold, and then that day was like boiling hot, and yeah, but I just I did it for like did it for like a charity thing, and therefore I had to finish it, so I made sure I just finished it really, like rather than go for any
yeah,
sort of
PB.
time and stuff. Yeah, exactly. It was just about finishing it to me. But exercise I cannot, and my daughter's like now both of them, I've got them, we go to the gym together. I go running with them. I think, for mental health for me, that was massive. And, I can't overestimate how important to me exercise is. And not exercise like everybody has to run a marathon, but even like, just small bits, even if you have to, have a foot pedal thing that you pedal while you're sitting down at watching TV. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a marathon. It can be any form of movement that you can show improvement in. Again, it's just that progress thing potentially that I think that's so important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And like you rightly say, you don't have to run a marathon. I mean, it is the ultimate. Okay, my body can
Yeah.
absolutely 100% support me here, and
Yeah.
it's a great thing. It's a great achievement, and I love that day. But yeah, 100%. You could just equally, do a little bit of Pilates or yoga
Absolutely.
or whatever, just some sort of movement, and you gradually start to see that your body can support you. You'll feel stronger and better for it.
Yes.
But when we are specifically worried, let's say about our heart health or about something else, and we then fear, if I exercise, my heart will beat faster, and then we start to feed into that. That's quite common, reason why you might not want to do it. So my advice there would just be to start really small and gradually and build it up. And every time your body supports you, you give yourself a huge pat on the back and you keep going. And it is about that momentum. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah, that
yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, I think, in the big scheme of things, yeah, exercise, certainly would be up there in the top things that I would recommend to anybody,
Yeah.
just for your mental well-being as well.
Yeah, great. And so life now, what does that look like for you, Rob? I know obviously you're now an author, but health anxiety for you, how does that lie? How are things with that these
Yeah,
days?
health anxiety, like zero for 15 years doesn't mean that I'm without the problems of life. So, everybody has like, ups and downs in life. Obviously, I'm not going to suggest that suddenly I've found like a nirvana where nothing affects me, I have no problems, but I can assuredly say that health anxiety is zero and any anxiety actually. So, no anxiety for, 15 years. And I wrote the book actually from a hospital bed as well. And that was when I started writing it, when I had I had an illness that was actually kind of was really bad, and it was on holiday, and I had got something wrong with my leg, and that's when I wrote the book, and I was so calm doing it, and that was the ironic thing that the final time that I am actually very unwell and potentially, really unwell in Thailand in a hospital bed, I feel as calm as anything,
Yeah.
and obviously I'm fine now from that. But the point is that I had no health anxiety then. I genuinely was like, okay, well, I've done all I can, everything, blah blah blah, and it was fine. And people were saying to me afterwards, oh, that must be so worrying, and it just wasn't. You know what I mean? But it's not avoidance either, because as I say, I go to the doctor when I need to. It's so no anxiety, and basically, um, I've got a very good conversation with myself around these things. So, and I still have to like make sure I don't go into patterns about anything actually, like, so because I think my mind was quite prone to going into patterns. So I still have to like use my method sometimes, even for like other things. For example, if I start thinking too much about sleep, I could like be get myself in a rabbit hole about, even though I sleep great, I could suddenly start overthinking that and then not sleeping. Do you know what I mean? I have to, so I still employ the method to this day, and but I've never had a scare, particularly with health anxiety since, and I don't have any anxiety at all. But as I say, I do still have like the ups and downs of life, so I'm not suggesting that. But it's great not to have to waste the time on that, basically.
Yeah,
So
you're able to
uh,
live again. This it's so lovely
yeah.
to see, and the fact that you've devised this, you found your own way through is lovely to hear, because I know going through it that actually
Mm.
you are right in what you say, is that there wasn't a lot of help back in the day, and I would have loved to have found a book like the one you've written, because I felt very alone. I didn't really understand it. I didn't understand hypochondria, which is what I was being told I had. But I really felt very alone, and I didn't know anybody else that was going through anything anywhere near similar. So to have that book is amazing. So where can people find your book? Where can they get it?
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's Amazon really at the moment. So it's amazon.co.uk, or amazon.com, and it's in, yeah, both the US as well. And really just, searching it in there, or put it into Google. But I don't like to go to Google, but yeah, to put it into Amazon, and yeah, the name, or health anxiety book and something that's coming up, and it's doing well, and I rewrote it quite a lot. It is supposed to be funny. It is supposed to be disparaging deliberately. It is quite sort of buried my soul, to a large extent in it. But I think the thing was, people didn't really tend to stick around to tell you they'd recovered, because if they did, I didn't see it very often. And I was in all these forums, groups, Reddits, etc. And I see a lot of hopelessness and despair and symptom sharing, to be quite honest with you, like in these groups.
Right.
People more share symptoms, in my experience, to get reassurance from other people than they do addressing the core part of it. And I don't know about other people, but for me, that wasn't so healthy. And so, to be in that learned helplessness, if you like, so I
Yeah.
wanted to put something out there that said, actually, there is another side to this. I've had it so bad that potentially, if I've had it this bad, I'm hard pushed to think there's many that have probably had it much worse. So therefore, if I can come out the other side and be fine, then everybody can. And that's kind of the message, beyond it, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about your mindset. I'd
Yeah.
certainly believe that you can. You've done it, I've done it. I've worked with lots of people that have done it too. So, it is a reality and you can achieve it. But if
Absolutely.
you're starting this on the back foot, thinking I'm never going to get through, or this is always going to be my reality, it's going to be so
Mhm.
much harder. So, come at it with a view that this is not going to, hinder me or stop me from moving forwards. I can do it. And you and I are both living proof that that is something that's achievable.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah,
Amazing.
I believe that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's called Google Panic Repeat, and it's on Amazon. I will pop the link in the show notes anyway, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so pleased that this is not something that hinders you these days, and that you are able to go on and live without fear. It's
That's all.
amazing.
Thank you very much. Well, I've got teenage girls, so I still get fear, but I just get it from a different place.
Yes, I'm with you. I have a teenage daughter as well, so
That's all.
I fully empathise with that, Rob. It's been lovely to
Thank
chat
you.
with you. Thank you so much for coming on, and wishing you all the best. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.